In this video, the middle-aged nerds discuss spoilers from books they read decades ago. Do you really need a spoiler alert? Do you really?
Oh, hi. I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie.
And I'm Bill, also known as Matt Stagger.
And this is Non-Terrestrial Half-Life. Welcome back to the YouTube channel that rereads books from our youth and reviews and discusses how they went. This week, we've got a friend of ours from What the Adaptation, Rebecca. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for
How's your
being
other
here.
channel? Have you had anything new on the other channel yet?
No,
Nothing new?
I'm on a hiatus, so, someday.
Okay.
But my
Some
life
of you might
needs
know her from...
to calm itself down and, get into a new groove before I can do that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Some of you might remember her from Reading the Pattern, probably one of the best Wheel of Time channels out there. If you haven't seen her channel, please go subscribe. Link in the doobly-doo. This week, Bill, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the Time Quintet.
By Madeleine L'Engle. But we're only doing the first three, because neither Bill or I have ever read the other two, or at least not within the criteria time period.
I never read them either.
Did you read the other two? So we've all three of us has only read the Time trilogy.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So we're going to discuss all three of them together. That would be A Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, and A Swiftly Tilting Planet. I used to always forget book two's title.
Yeah.
But before we do that, Rebecca, we have a question we always ask our first-time guests. When was it that you discovered you loved books? And what books led to that?
Yeah. So this is a good question because I just don't remember a time before I loved books. Like my mom would always tell this story about me as a toddler, so pre-memory for me of just, being this tiny child and just saying to her constantly, read the book. And then she would just read to me over and over and over and over again. So I've always loved books, basically. And so I feel like my love of books came before I even remember, and probably began with certain picture books. There were literally, maybe a few picture books I remember from a child particularly loving. But then, I guess in terms of books that I would read to myself, early books that I remember reading to myself. I remember a book called The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster.
Yes.
That's a favorite.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's really good. And
don't jump to conclusions.
Jump to conclusions. Yeah, it's full of
confusions,
wordplay, and so it's a very clever book. But I read every Nancy Drew book when I was growing up. And I probably read everything by L.M. Montgomery. Those are some things I remember early reading to myself and really liking. But like I said, it probably began even before that because I've always loved books.
I did love Encyclopedia Brown. I don't know if anybody remembers Encyclopedia Brown.
I remember that.
It was kind of
what it was, but the name.
It was a kid's version of Sherlock Holmes. And his name is Encyclopedia Brown.
I don't know if I read it.
So, do you guys remember the first time you read the Time Quintet trilogy? A Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, and The Swiftly Tilting Planet. Do you remember your first time reading that? Bill?
Yes and no. Like I said, I do remember our library had this contest thing going on who could finish the first book, and they had our names and charts. And they would fill it up with a red marker on, how far your progress was, trying to see. But I remember taking my time with it. I had trouble learning to read when I was young, and I had just really grasped reading at the time. So I took my time with it. I didn't win. Let's just say that. But I do remember really enjoying it. So much so that I went on, and I remember finishing the books. But this time I'm I don't remember the whole mitochondrial book. I don't remember that at all.
I only have vague...
I just forgot.
Yeah. I only have vague memories of book 2 and 3. I remember the title, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, but I didn't remember the story at all. I probably, like I said, I was telling you guys before we started recording, I think this was one of the books that was read to us in school. I seem to remember it being read. Maybe the first book was read and then the others we had to read. But I know we went through these books in school, in elementary school. Probably between 4th and 6th grade, somewhere around there. I think on the younger side because I was at a school that, an accelerated school. Becca?
Yeah. So it's very hard for me to remember exactly when I read it. I can pretty much, I remember where I lived when I read these books. And because I moved around a lot, that narrows it down somewhat. So it was probably between the ages of 8 and 11 when I read them. And it was actually surprising to me, like how little specifically I remembered as I was rereading. I thought more of it would like trigger memories of like, oh yeah, I remember that, but a lot of it really didn't. And I'm not even sure how I came to read it. I asked my mom, and she thought she had read it as a girl, so she might have recommended it to me, but even she wasn't sure. So I don't know particularly why I picked these books up, in the first place.
There's one thing that stood out in my memory all of these years. And that was, what's that planet in the Wrinkle in Time they go to where everybody has to be, where it rules?
Yeah.
The imagery of the kids bouncing the basketball, the girls jump roping, people coming out, opening the door, all in sync. Because I remember the teacher telling us that this was a criticism of the Soviet Union. Oh. And it's kind of funny because when you look at the United States, during the time period this book was written, it was all about conformity.
Wait.
Everybody's supposed to have their little white picket fence. The mom stays home, 2.5 kids. The dad wears a suit and a fedora or whatever to work. And America was all about conformity in the 50s.
Didn't you say you read this in like 4th or 5th grade? And your teacher asked that?
Yes. I would like. Okay. In element, I was in an accelerated.
I would have been like, "What's communism?" We 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah, we knew in 4th grade what communism. We started following the news back then. I've been a news junkie since a young age. So, but yeah, so I just remember, and I always thought it was funny because that's kind of what the 50s were. It was this whatever that planet was, Kamataz or something like that.
I don't even remember, but yeah, the It planet.
Yeah, where it runs it. It two capital letters. I wonder if Stephen King's read this book. Actually, he probably has, anyways. Just in general.
It would make sense.
Yeah.
I think he featured it in one of his band book. He had a band book tour he went on a couple of years ago.
Oh, cool.
If I'm not mistaken, he talked about this book in particular being widely banned at one point.
And so why was this, I don't even know, because I don't particularly remember that. Why was this book, what was the impetus for banning it particularly?
Oh, I was
yeah, it's the crazy. 80s. Satanic
conservative Christians got upset in the first book. I think it's the first book where there's a passage, specifically this passage where, who are these people, the Mrs. W's are talking about figures in our history that have fought for the light, against the dark. Yeah. And the kids are having to think of who. And Charles Wallace says, Jesus, of course. Yeah. And then everybody else starts naming off all these other names, including non-Christian names, Gandhi was included in there. And to the conservative Christians, this was just lumping Jesus in as just some old another regular Joe that fought against the dark for the light.
I see. I think it's a pretty Christian book, actually, but okay.
Yeah. It's annoyingly Christian.
It is.
It's there.
As an agnostic, it's mildly annoying how Christian this book is.
I agree.
Which makes me a little nervous about doing the Chronicles of Narnia.
I was about to say, you're a fan of Narnia, dude. You don't get more blatant than that.
That one is blatant, but it's entertaining. So, it kind of gets some points for that. Fun. Yeah.
You think it's been a long time since I read this or Earthsea? It's been even longer since I read Narnia. I have not read Narnia since I read The Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
I was 7 or 8 when I was 8 when I got to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings for the first time. So I literally haven't read that since I was 7.
Oh, okay.
I've seen the movies, and I've lived life and seen stuff about Chronicles of Narnia, but yeah, I am a little nervous about that one when we cover that. How
Well, this
annoyed I might
annoyed
get.
you. That is really gonna bug
This
you out.
mildly annoyed. This mildly annoyed.
Yeah.
The third book makes up for it, in my opinion, because while it sticks with the whole theological religious side, it's very pagan. Because that rune isn't to the Lord of heaven; it's to the lords of heaven. It's all plural, so it's very pagan still. Because you still,
I hadn't really thought about that, but I
because it
guess
came from some early, some the Welsh, pagans. They didn't take on the Christianity until they were in the New World in this book. Or maybe shortly before they came over, but they still had a lot of pagan influence on them. So it didn't bother me as much in the third book, but
yeah.
So we've gone over if we remembered how old we were. What are your memories, like I just did? What are your memories that do actually stand out from reading this book the first time? Rebecca?
So for me, it was actually like very, very little, surprisingly. Like I really remembered like the first few chapters of A Wrinkle in Time, like, the dark, stormy night. For some reason, I remember the dog, like the dog and Fortinbras, like is like, I don't know why that stuck out to me because it wasn't actually that important, but I still remembered the dog. And just like, Meg, and that she had like the little brother and her dad was missing. Like that's what like was in my mind. And like, yeah, I really had
Did you remember
very,
this? I remembered this too.
nope.
No?
Did not.
Part of it's, I'd seen this cover. This is the cover I've seen the most number of times.
Yeah. I think the one that I remember reading was this one with like the rings. I'm pretty sure that's the cover I read when I was a kid.
Okay.
I don't know for sure, but that was the one that looked familiar to me. And then
I've seen
this one is the one I have now, this one there. But
I've seen this yellow bordered one too.
Yeah.
What did you read it this last time as? Audiobook or book?
No, I actually I picked up the physical books, which it was unusual for me because I really do audiobooks. So I don't know if it was a great choice, but I did it thinking like, okay, well, maybe like my kids might want to read these at some point. So like, and I don't own them in any form. And
Right.
So I bought like the quintet in paperback, and it definitely made it more challenging for me to get through it because I'd read like before bed and I'd find like myself getting sleepy and stuff. And I just do better audiobooks like, during the day and stuff. So it was a bit of a challenge, but
audiobook for me. I did audiobook this time.
Here.
What I remember,
I had the best narrator. I just want to point out, I had the best possible narrator for this book. Her name is Madeleine L'Engle.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Just reading it for kids, actually, is what the audio recording is.
Basically, the only thing I really remember about reading, particularly the first book, Wrinkle in Time, was the Mrs. W's. I remember them clearly.
Yeah.
They were the freshest thing sort of about the story. I remember Meg's name and the basic premise that her dad was missing, but I forgot about her brother and just about everything else.
Yeah. It's pretty similar to me, like so little of it actually stuck in my brain.
I remembered his name was always, he was always called by two names, his first and middle name. And it's
Charles Wallace.
I always thought that was, I always found that weird. It's written weirdly formal because he's almost always Charles Wallace. And then the mom and dad are always Mr. and Mrs. Murray.
Yeah.
Never, so it's formal, like from the kid's point of view, because they don't even call him mom and dad. It's just Mr. and it's just weird.
And then Meg
Interesting
has like
prose choice.
50 different like nicknames, some variations on Meg, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess like
Like-
technically her name's Margaret, right? But no one ever calls her Margaret.
Yes.
But she's always like Megatron or whatever, you know,
Megaparsec.
whatever. Yeah.
I like
There's so many of them.
Megaparsec. Yeah. Other than the kids bouncing the ball, that sequence there on that world, like I said, vague recollections of the Mrs. W's, but I couldn't remember, and I still couldn't tell you which one's which half the time. You know,
Yeah.
they're, you know, Mrs. Who I know because Bill just pointed it out to me earlier today. Is the one who does the quoting.
The
I'm not
quoting,
going to
yeah.
forget that.
Yeah.
Oh, she's my favorite.
I feel like I think
My
Mrs.
favorite.
Whatsit is the one that like talks more normally. And then Mrs. Witch has like that weird way of talking. I don't even know how you would describe it exactly, but she's the one who like you can't even like really like see her.
She doesn't materialize. She doesn't hardly ever materializes.
Yeah, and Mrs. Who does the quotes. So Mrs. Whatsit talks the most typically, I guess.
It was really fun listening to the author read the book, though. You know, a couple of times. I read it a week or two ago, and then the last 3 days, I've just been plowing through one book a day,
Yeah.
or trying. You know, and at 1.3 speed, maybe up to 1.5 speed, it's 3 to 4 hours books, maybe 5. You know, But
Yeah, I should have done audio, but that's okay. It's fine. I own the paperbacks now, so it's all good.
you
Sometimes
gonna read the other two?
I probably will, but we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I have them, so when I get to it.
I'm planning.
As I sometimes I get annoyed with authors narrating their own stories.
I mean, they're
'Cause
not
they can be
always
great
good.
at it.
Yeah, but not always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Stephen King. I'm obsessed with Stephen King, always have been. I named my son Stephen after him, but that man is not a good book narrator.
Yeah, just because you can
Oh.
write doesn't mean you can do both. You know?
He did a
Right.
couple of his
No,
own
I think-
books, and I'm like, I wince every time I hear it.
Yeah.
I think she does a pretty good job. You can tell she's reading for a class. You know, it sounds like she's specifically reading to kids, whether
Okay.
there's actually kids there or not. It's like she's got this firmly in mind, and it's got a little prologue, like a minute-long prologue, not even prologue, forward type thing.
Yeah.
Beginning of these, of her, saying some people thought it was, when I first went to publish it, some thought it was too complicated for adults. That kids wouldn't be able to understand it.
Wouldn't say it's
And I'm like,
complicated.
No,
That's-
Intricate, but not
That's-
complicated.
Yeah. So the first time you read this book, who was your favorite character and why? I got to say, my favorite character, the first time I read the book, I couldn't tell you.
I know. Yeah.
I
I
really
can't tell
couldn't
you
tell
the
you.
first time.
Um,
I
don't
can tell you who
remember.
it is now. It's Mrs. Who.
Who is
I
it?
mean, come on.
Mrs.
Yeah.
Who?
Anybody
is
who
cool.
answers only in literary quotes, no matter the language, come on.
Yeah.
That is a person built for me. Like, I love her so much.
She totally beats Bumblebee's speech pattern.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to guess it was probably Meg, but like, I don't remember because it's so little of it stuck with me. But yeah, I mean, this time I definitely felt more like I enjoyed the Mrs. W's quite a bit. And then I was like really bummed that we didn't see them anymore. I was like, I
yeah,
don't know, the way like the first book ends, I was kind of like, oh, okay, so like they're gonna come back, right? No. And I was like, where are the Mrs. W's?
Well, they
Right?
don't even
When I got to-
explain why they have to leave. They just sort
I
of,
know.
okay, see ya, and
Yeah.
they're gone. And it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
when I started the third book and read the third book a couple weeks ago, I was really disappointed because the character that I'm positive this is who I identified with, if they weren't my favorite, but I at least identified as a kid because I identified now, remembering what it was like for me as a kid, is Calvin
Yeah.
O'Keefe.
Calvin.
And it was the thing he said about when he found out how smart everybody in the Murray family was. He's like, I found my people. I don't have to basically said he didn't have to dumb himself down
Mhm.
to avoid getting picked on for being too smart. Like Calvin gets picked on, and then we see Charles Wallace getting picked on. It became for a long time their second nature to play down, my smarts for a long time, and then I just said, fuck it. And I don't care if people care, think I'm smart anymore.
I don't think I had to play it down because, I wasn't that smart, but it's okay. I'm happy with who I am.
Good.
Yeah.
It sucks being the school nerd. It really does.
I was
I mean,
more geeky.
I relate to that, but yeah.
Yeah, I was the nerdy geek and a dork. Were there any character flaws you noticed of the characters you liked? Let's be honest about your characters.
Honestly, no. I mean, they act childish sometimes, but they're children, so it's not a flaw.
Yeah,
It's
no.
a feature. So,
yeah, I was just gonna say
so
that.
there's not really, anything that major.
Yeah, I mean, I had some things that like I didn't necessarily read very like smoothly to me, but I feel like it's more like later questions. I don't think there was anything really on this question where I was like, oh, like I didn't like the way this character was written as a character per se. Like I didn't, or a flaw. I mean, certainly characters should have flaws, right? So like Meg has flaws. But she should, she's a kid and she's growing.
She's a 13-year-old kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't necessarily remember
12-year-old
some of the things about her as a character, especially at the beginning. But it wasn't something where I was like, oh, well, this is like poorly written for her as a character. I didn't think that.
Right. I mean, this isn't Earthsea where we have Ged and he's arrogant and all that. I mean, these are just kids and they're kids who are thrust into an amazing sort of adventure and situation and they react accordingly. So,
I saw this series called Young Adult, and I'd say it's more middle grade.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for children, it's more middle grade.
Yeah.
And whereas Earthsea, I would definitely say is more of a young adult. Earthsea is definitely young adult, I think. I wouldn't want to, you really can't. I mean, the respect the Time Quintet has and the respect the Earthsea series has are pretty close. I mean, they're seen as, they're held in as pretty high esteem, both of them. Maybe A Wrinkle in Time might be a bit more well known because it's taught in more schools probably than Earthsea.
Yeah, and it was like made into like a movie and stuff like that. Maybe.
Twice.
Yeah, twice.
Earthsea's been made into a couple of TV movies on Sci-Fi Channel that were terrible.
Those don't exist, Glenn. Those don't exist. We don't talk about those.
They exist. They're there.
We don't talk about those.
They're there to torture us.
I mean, the one thing I will say that like triggered any kind of a memory as I was reading it was like Prago in book 2, the cherubim. As I was reading that, I had forgotten about it, but like it sparked some memory where I was like, oh yeah, like that name, this feels familiar. It was literally the one thing, because everything else as I was reading it, I was like, it was the vague memory that I'd had from the very beginning of the story, or it just didn't come back to me at all. There was nothing. But that one was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I kind of remember that. But like,
I
not even
the black thing. And I think it was because around the time I read this, the Never Ending Story came in. And I remember the Nothing. And I remember thinking the black thing was like the Nothing.
Yeah.
So I kind of equated them.
I still have questions about this black thing. Is this supposed to be like the same as like in book 2 and 3? Then we start talking about like the Ecthroi or however we say
Ecthroi.
this. Is that like the same? Ecthroi. Is that supposed to be the same thing? Because this like legitimately was like not clear to me.
I'm not really sure. My supposition at this point with the 3 books I've read is that maybe the Ecthroi worked for that darkness, the black thing, because the black thing itself was evil. It was evil. It wasn't just that it was evil. It is evil itself.
Yeah.
Is what that thing was. So
I
also, I think about it. I remembered the brain version, form that it had.
The brain version of it.
I remembered the brain version of it. The name Prognoskis, it comes from the Greek. It contains the root word for knowledge. I believe that's the gnos.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Gnosis is knowledge. And Ecthroi is ancient Greek for enemies. It's the plural form of enemy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
I like the names that she used there.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
while I was looking stuff up after reading it, the story of Maddox Ap Owen Gwynedd, that this Welshman came to the United States
Oh, yeah.
before Leif Erikson.
Mm-hmm.
In 1170, it's actually a real world legend. So I thought she made it up as made up the legend itself.
was
No, it's a real
wondering.
legend.
Yeah, I was wondering about
Yeah,
that.
I was curious, so I looked, and I was like, oh, okay, so that it's an actual legend that goes on there. The character's father is an actual king of Wales that lived at one point, but the guy who came to North America. The name's not attested to in any of the documents of the time.
No, I mean,
All right.
honestly, I actually enjoyed dipping back in and sort of trying to look at it from my, fifth grade self and all the stuff I missed as a fifth grader. Like I said, what I do remember is kind of spotty, but the stuff I do remember, this feeling of joy and accomplishment at finishing the books.
Yeah.
So just that dipping my toe back in that water was kind of fun. So
And
I
the books
really
have
enjoyed
good.
it.
The books I think are really good for kids. It says a lot of good things in these books.
Yeah, and there's something I guess that's more like on the theme question. I had some things to say there.
Yeah. There's a lot of messaging going on in these books. And I don't think it beats it over your head either.
I mean, some of them are, I feel so mixed on this question, because there were some like thematic parts that I really liked, and then some that I kind of don't. So it was interesting.
Right.
So the things that I really liked, I mean, okay, so in the first book, I felt like it was really appropriate as like a coming of age story, that Meg has this expectation that when she finds her father, that's going to solve everything. Her dad is going to be able to take care of everything that's wrong, like fix everything that's wrong. And she realizes when she finds him that that's not going to happen, that it is up to her to solve this particular problem. And I think that is so well done as a theme for a coming of age story, because I think that is a child's view, that at some point when you're a child, you may think that your parents can do anything, can solve all that's wrong in the world. And at some point you grow up enough that you realize that they're humans who are flawed and they cannot. And so I thought that was a really like nicely done theme. And then also that the theme also in that book, that it was love, love
Right.
that she had, that love for her brother, that was what made the difference and how she could overcome it. So, that was really nice. And I think even the love theme in the second book, I maybe liked even more, which is the idea that to really know someone, to see them as they are, recognize them, name them for who they are, that it's sort of inseparable from loving the person, that if you can really see them as they are, then you love them. And like the Mr. Jenkins character, who she had no reason to love, like every reason, he was an antagonist, but to be able to go on that journey of like seeing something real about him and coming to love that part of him, that was really nice. So those are themes that I particularly liked in it. And then I have one that I kind of don't like, but I don't know if you guys want to talk about what you like.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
No,
so
go ahead.
I want to hear.
The thing that I think I don't like is this sort of, I don't even know if it's exactly a theme, but I guess I would call it a theme, where it's like the things that are going wrong on the planet, the things that are going wrong with humanity are because of the black thing, or because of the ecthroid. Like it's repeated again and again, that like whenever there's war, whenever there's these things going wrong on Earth or with humanity, it's because of those outside evil forces. And that like our species, our planet was at one time, before those things came in, I guess better, and then we've gotten worse. We're deteriorating as a planet or as a species because of these outside evil forces, as opposed to it being something that evil can be internal, right? That humans can have evil within us. So I don't particularly like that theme, and it may just be my personal, like that's not how I view
I can
evil.
see your point.
I don't see the past as some, idyllic thing that we've fallen from. I think it's a Christian kind of worldview of like the, fall from Eden, and evil coming from Satan, like the ecthroi could be like demons essentially, right? So I think that view of,
I think.
right, that view of evil and humans falling from, paradise and all that. That's not how I see it. So I don't love that theme, but it might resonate for people who are Christian, because I'm not.
Yeah.
So,
No, I'm with you. There's a lack of accountability for humanity's own actions.
mhm.
The whole nuclear war thing, and they're
Yeah.
going to chalk it up to somebody else. But no, that's us, guys.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We did that.
Yeah.
It wasn't divine intervention. That was us. So I'm with you.
To slightly play devil's advocate here, though, I think that aside from the ecthroi, I agree I understand with the ecthroi being an outside force, but the darkness that we see, the evil itself that we see in the first book, and we only see it really that one time as darkness. That's just the visual manifestation of the evil within humanity.
It could be.
Okay.
It could be. And
now the ecthroi I can see is I see the ecthroi as being an external source, but just because we see this darkness at one place externally doesn't mean it's not coming originally from the darkness within the people who are evil, because it is said to, it's not, like I said, it's not that it has evil as its nature, its definition is evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd have to go and look and see like how clearly that is articulated. I do see an inconsistency between like the black thing and the ecthroi, and it's not a clear through line.
Right.
It almost feels like she just like kind of went in a different direction, instead of like continuing to explore how she'd set it up in the first book. But like, in like books 2 and 3, you have that continuity of the ecthroi and like them being always there, always sort of responsible. I think a lot of the onus is put on the ecthroi for why these things are happening. And so I mean, it's just that part's not to my taste, but it might resonate for other people better.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at it your way, Glenn.
Okay.
The fact that
the devil's advocate way.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm just saying the point you made. I'm like, if you look at it that way, then when she defeated the enemy, that should have got rid of all the evil within men. And it doesn't, because we have book 2 and 3. So that's where your argument, that devil's advocate.
But do we see that particular darkness in books 2 and 3? No, we see ecthroi.
I mean,
we see the effects of it. So, which wouldn't be there if they defeated all the evil men.
Okay. Well,
I mean, one thing we could perhaps just say here is that it's not the most clearly articulated theme either. Right. Like my general impression is that evil in these books is mainly an external force that's like humanity is responding to, reacting to, like, we're manifesting it, but that like it's sort of coming from external things. But I don't think it's super clearly articulated. So even though I don't generally like the way I think it is articulated, it's also not as like clear-sighted as it could be, I think.
Yeah, I think she's saying we feed it.
Yeah.
We feed it and make it grow and make it grow stronger. But it is its own separate thing to start with. It is always the vibe I got, or what I got this time anyway.
I think it fits with like I said, a Christian view of evil. Like it like generally all that seems consistent with that, and which is like Satan. So, but it's different.
And I have to admit, I really like the fact that in the third book, she makes a pastor one of the bad guys. The minister who wanted to hang the witch. With Zilla or whatever, whichever the first The
Yeah.
first
I
one
mean, I'm
was.
assuming that's kind of there's some very historical
I was
accuracy
about
there.
to
Yeah,
say,
So yeah.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not exactly
But
surprising. I mean,
Yeah.
no,
we all
but
know the
you know,
Salem witch trials, and
right. But she didn't have to. She didn't have to include that. She chose to include that. So it's showing that she's not saying all versions of Christianity are good. You know, your judgmental
Well,
types right
I mean,
here. You know, and that ties in. You know, what's the minister's name? But that storyline ties in with a lot of Charles Wallace's storyline, Meg's storyline, and Calvin's storyline about fitting in at the whole individuality versus conformity, issue that's throughout the entire all three of these books. Very much, in all three of these books. Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger themes there. I
I
just
think they have
it
different sort of themes. The first book, the big theme is love.
mhm.
yeah, but there are some that go through all three of them.
Second theme, I'm just going over main themes. The main theme I got from the second book was forgiveness was a big thing,
Okay,
particularly with Principal Jenkins.
Mhm.
That sometimes
Meg had to grok him first before she could love him.
yeah. Well, that's what Rebecca was talking about earlier. When you truly know somebody, when you grok
Yep.
somebody, when you understand them on that level, you can't help but love them, which is
Yeah.
also to throw in a sci-fi reference. It's one of the things that bothered Ender and Ender's Game so much
Yeah.
is that I learn my enemy, I love my enemy, and it's when I love my enemy that I can destroy my enemy, and that tears me
Yeah.
apart. So
Yeah.
you get a little bit of that here. It's not as heavy as it is, say, in Ender's Game, but it is there.
These are packed full with themes all over the place.
Yeah.
There was a lot of there was a number of instances of bullying as a theme. Various characters. And like I said, that's in its essence. You could call the accusation of her being a witch a form of bullying. It's a very extreme form because it was going to lead to her hanging, but it's bullying everybody else into you conform, you agree, you don't disagree with the minister, or you're going to be accused of being a witch next. So it was an emotional bullying and putting people into line. Love, as you both mentioned, good versus evil is clearly, all three books, probably, I'm assuming the other two as well.
Yeah.
What those two are called, I don't know. I don't even know the titles for them.
I don't know.
I have them. Hold on one second.
All right. Another one was there was a
Many
serious
Waters.
anti-nuclear bomb. Many Waters.
Many Waters and An Acceptable Time.
Okay.
Oh,
So
okay. Yep, didn't know those.
Very anti-nuclear bomb, which is always that's a good theme in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
I do think it's
anti-war
kind of
generally. It seems
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think it was particularly funny though that the guy who had the nuclear bombs in the third book and wanted to set them off was a country in South America, which is by the agreements of all the countries in South America, there's not a single nuclear bomb on that continent.
I know. I'm like, why is
They're a
South
nuclear-free
America
zone.
going under the bus in this book? I was like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
not
the one
it.
country that doesn't have nuclear
The one
program.
continent, yeah.
They're not aggressors. Come on now.
Yeah. Everything matters, great or small. That one's kind of really hits home in the third book, where the Frondalai, however, I can never,
Wasn't that the second book?
That's the third book, I thought.
No.
No, is that the second book?
The second book is
Yeah,
all
that
about
is
the,
the-
yeah.
That's second book.
right.
You're right.
They go
That's
to
a
the
mitochondrial
place
drive.
where size doesn't
Yeah.
matter or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
going inside her brother's mitochondria. So
Yeah.
it's a little weird. It's a little
Yeah,
magic school
and
bus,
then-
but
Yeah, it's like, oof. I mean,
Yeah.
these books really do bend genre because there
Yeah.
are times where it's very science fiction-y and other times very, very fantasy.
I really ended up my memory of it was more sci-fi, and I think it was mainly just because the family was they're scientists, and
Right.
so, but I reading it again, I was like, there's not actually that much science in here. It's a little sciencey, and they like throw in like mitochondria and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I didn't think it was very much science fiction. Like I think it's much more fantasy with a little flavor of science in there. That was my impression
Yeah.
reading it
I
this
know
time.
she did some research. I know she did her due diligence researching mitochondria to at least to understand them to an
Yeah,
extent. At least
yeah,
that's what she claims in the forward to that book.
yeah.
Um, but
It's the
if you want to call it a forward,
powerhouse of the cell.
yeah.
Right, right. Which we all remember. Yeah. No, anyway.
Whether or not there's such thing as mitochondritis, I don't know. That just sounded really nasty. Mitochondritis. That
I don't know. I
I
really
mean,
enjoyed the quantum leap aspect of the third book, so I
yeah,
had
yes,
fun.
yeah.
I had
I
fun
did
with
have a
that.
lot of fun with that.
That was like I liked that as like a sort of structure. I have some like questions. Maybe you guys can answer this because I
I'll
like that
try.
as a structure for the story. Like it was different and fun, and I kind of liked it. Um, but I kind of gave up at some point trying to like keep track of like the lineage of like all these different like because we were
Oh,
jumping
Mm.
around and like who's the descendant of whom and whatever. But okay, so like the crux of the story is Charles Wallace has to like change these two pairings, right? These two couples that like he like interrupts and like they pair off with someone else. So presumably like the lineage changes. But like wasn't Beezy, her Meg's mother-in-law, Beezy, wasn't she
yeah.
like a direct descendant somewhere in this line?
Yeah, and
And
now
then
she's a direct descendant to somebody else.
but like so that okay, so well, I mean, I had to like really just like throw all this out because, and this is what happens
Yeah.
with like time travel, because it's a time travel story. I was kind of like, well, really, you probably should have had it such that like making this change meant that like Beezy didn't exist. And um like her,
Calvin.
which would mean that like, her husband didn't exist, her baby didn't exist. Like all this stuff probably
Right.
should have gone away because like you made that
Yeah.
change, but they kept all that
And
and it was just like, well, they're the same people, but they still exist, but there's different like
Well,
I don't know.
there's a theory that the minute he changed it, he creates a new branch. That doesn't
Yeah.
destroy the old branch. It just creates a
yeah.
new branch
Yeah,
where
and
she doesn't exist.
maybe also again because I gave up trying to follow like the lineage, right? It's not like laid out. So it maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she's not like a direct descendant. Maybe she's just like in the family and like the branch that like got messed with. I don't know because there was two branches that got messed with. So I don't know. But like
Did you make the connection before they did in the book? Mad
which
Dog and
one?
Matic? Mad Dog and Matic?
I don't know because there were so many names in there, and
I
I
heard
honestly, like I said, I at that point I kind of was like I was skimming some of that a little bit to be honest. Like as much as I was like trying to like had to like hurry up, and like as much as like I said I like the structure of that story, like at the same time like all that like details of like the family lineage, I was like okay the name there's too
what
many names that sound the same, and it was like I'm not following this. I'm not going to try.
what I'm confused about is what did Charles Wallace actually do except go along for a ride within these people? I don't thinking back right now, I don't remember him actually taking control in any way
So the
or
one thing that
any
I think
specific things.
the most notable thing he did was as Matthew, the writer character who was
Yeah.
writing, and he had a twin who had gone off to Vespugia, and and the fiance was still there with Matthew, and the fiance's dad was like refusing to let her go. Um, and it seems like in the original timeline, she would have never been allowed to go, which would have meant that there would have been different pairings. Um, the one that she did end up marrying, Bran, would have married somebody else, and then Bran's sister Gwen would have also married somebody else. She married the one that
Right.
like died. It seems like that guy was like the problem, the biggest problem. But anyway, but by sending the fiance, that was the thing that Charles Wallace did as Matthew, the
Oh,
writer.
okay.
he sent the fiance, he got her a ticket, put her and sent her off to South America. And
Right.
by her showing up in South America, it swapped like two pairings that would have happened, and two different pairings happened instead.
My brain must have shut down for a moment or two both times I listened to that part of the book, because I'm not remembering.
I don't blame you, because like I said, there's so many names in this whole thing, and too many of them are the same. Like every woman has like a Z name that sounds almost exactly the same.
Zill.
Yeah.
Zill, and Zilly.
And it was ridiculous. And then
it's kind of stupid.
There was like Z names and M names, and there were just too many of them. But anyway.
It's like S names in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah. Yeah. So he did do something. I think that was the main thing that he did, that like changed the lineage. So it like, that presumably whoever was going to have kids that would lead to Mad Dog ended up like that lineage changed. And so they had a different, version. Offspring. Yeah. That was more peaceful. But yeah, somehow that line changed, but I still don't quite understand why Beezy's line didn't change, and like why she still existed, why Calvin still existed, and all that. But like I said, I stopped trying to follow it.
Maybe they branched off before that time.
Maybe she wasn't supposed to be like a direct descendant of either of those swapped pairings, but I thought she was. But again, I stopped trying, so I don't know. Someone else on the internet maybe knows, but not me.
There's got to be a flow chart somewhere.
Probably someone has made a lineage, chart somewhere, which would be helpful to know if they really did muck up the time travel stuff or not.
Are there any elements of this book that would clash with today's, cultural mores, or actually stand out as being an early adopter of modern day mores?
I think it was a really strong female lead character in the first book, which wasn't common at the time at all. But she's very independent, very smart, very capable, and she has her flaws, but it's mostly because she's young. Mm-hmm. I think she was written rather well as a great female protagonist, which, like I said, at the time we didn't get a lot of in fantasy or science fiction. So however you want to classify this, I think that was well done. And
I mean, I think that I liked that aspect of it as well. For me, in terms of like gender stuff that stood out a bit, and it's not bad, but like there were a couple little things that I do think, again, looking at it with today's lens, stand out a little bit. And this one isn't like the first one isn't like gender so much, but like with Meg and Calvin, I felt like the hints that were there in books like 1 and 2 of that relationship to come probably should not have been in there. Like the age difference between them is not that great in the long run, but like she's very much a child, and he's like, I mean, I don't know what she is in the first book, like 12 or so, and he's like 3 or 4 years. Like 14. He's 2 years older. He's like 3 or 4 years older than her, because I think she's in like middle school and he's in high school, and then in the second book, I think they're maybe they're both in high school. Like he's a senior and she might be a freshman. I don't know. Anyway, she's at least 3 years older than her. So if she's like 12 and he's like 15, and he's like kissing her or something at one point, I think. And it was just, they just could have left it out. Like, just, it's fine 14. He's 14? I thought he was supposed to be older than that. Well,
yeah, I thought he was 16, honestly.
I thought he was too. I got the impression he was older, but anyway, I probably it's fine. I just probably would have like left that stuff out. Like, it's fine that in the third book, they're older, they're adults. Like, it's not like they're that big of an age gap. Right. It's just that at that age, it's more significant. And I didn't think that she was of an age where like romance should really be in there. So I would have just left that out completely. Like, there didn't need to be any mention in books 1 or 2 of them being anything more than friends. Like, it could just be like later on, yeah, they grew up, they got married. That's fine. So I probably would have done without that.
You didn't like them holding hands?
No, the holding hands was fine. That was fine.
Oh, okay.
That I don't mind that at all. But I think he like kisses
Okay.
her at some point, I thought. And then like in book two, there's
I
just
remember
like
him
this.
telling her she was beautiful a couple of times,
It's
but
not. I don't even mind that. There was. I swear there was like a kiss, and then in it might have been book one or book two. I don't remember, but there was one of them. There was, and then like in book two, there was some bit about like I think it's like just talking to her mom about like like Calvin likes her, and like there's like this like I don't know, like he could have any girl he wants, but like he wants Meg or something like that, and it just again the age gap and whatever. I just would have left those
perceived age gap.
little bits out, and and it just seemed like she wasn't of an age for it to be like romantic. And then just it's
I
fine.
get you though.
It happened on
Yeah,
screen.
I get you.
Yeah, and then like it's small, but I would have just left those little details out. And then for Mrs. Murray, I also just like make note of the fact that like so Mrs. Murray is no, it's not that like she's like a working mom, right? Fine, great. She's she's very
Work at
educated
home,
and
mom.
brilliant, right? Work at home mom. She supposedly gets a Nobel Prize somewhere in there. But like the thing that like did stand out to me again is like they're both scientists. Mr. and Mrs. Murray are both scientists. They both are clearly very like acclaimed, like skilled. But Mrs. Murray is the one that's home cooking dinners on the Bunsen burner, and Mr. Murray is off, never home or always being called up
I
by
was
the
going to bring.
president and whatnot.
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up too.
But really, my thing is like I get why that would be the case. I think it's more just that it ends up kind of like flattening the whole thing, in terms of Mrs. Murray is like this. She's brilliant. She's like, she's like working and being a mom. She's beautiful. And it's just, it's very flat. Like we don't really see that this is like a struggle for her. It's just like, yeah, and maybe that's, showing like, hey, women can do all these things, but it's also just, it doesn't like in any way dig into that and like what that would be like.
She's very one-dimensional.
It's very one-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as a
the dad, Mr. Murray
working
gets
mom.
more characterization.
Yeah.
Mr. Murray gets a lot more characterization, I think, than Mrs. Murray.
In book one, he certainly does, and then I don't think he's that significant of a character either after that. But he at least does get it in book one, and again, there's just that differential between like they're both scientists, they both work, but only one of them is parenting really, and running the household really. So the idea that Mrs. Murray,
I found it.
Oh my!
Holy cow!
Whoa.
All right. Gonna have to study that later.
Yeah, I know. I just like I can't believe I found it. I'm like, oh my, I found it.
That's so
Wow.
wild.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, those were my
And the only reason why
pet peeves a little
it's
bit.
Mr. Murray. The only reason why it's Mr. Murray that gets called by the president is because physics tends to be a science that has more bearing on government and the military and that kind of security stuff. Unless you're in the middle of a pandemic and then biochemist comes in handy.
I don't know. Anyway, I mean, that whole part was honestly silly, but I don't care, right? It's super silly that the president would call up Mr. Murray like that, but whatever, I don't care. It's just goofy,
the whole thing I was thinking, is there's a book, a book by Neil deGrasse Tyson called he co-wrote it, called Accessory to War, about scientists who basically, because of the work they do, is somehow scientists who've helped build war machines, and war devices, weaponry.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get the sense that that's what was
TBR.
Happening here. Like, there didn't seem to be a really good reason for Mr. Murray to be given that kind of information in book 3, but whatever, it's fine,
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, well, calling book 3 that was a leap for me.
Yeah, that's not doesn't match with like social, that's nothing. That's just
The whole concept of these books is pretty much hang your disbelief at the door.
Yeah. So
I'm
mean,
not overly concerned why
Yeah.
the president would call him, because it was convenient. I can accept it.
Right, yeah.
Plot wise.
So
and convenience happens in kids' books all the time.
yeah, it
And that,
does. So that's a minor thing. So again, I mean, my little things on like what might clash with like, current, perspectives on things, that they're relatively small. The other one that I didn't mention that's again also maybe small, but like in the third book, going through all this lineage and like the characters that were native, that had blue eyes, where like that was like a big thing, and like they made this big thing about like the blue eyes being so special, and that seems a little
Skewed.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't want to say it's like racist, but it's not great. So anyway,
It's a little bit of whitewashing, honestly.
or just like it's the like even like like in this groups that are not white, like they're sort of idealizing these like white features. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, considering them lucky and shit.
Yeah.
Well,
I think his name was Harcells. Was that his name? Harcells? Yeah.
Something like that. So we've already all said that we will probably all read the last two books in this series. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm anxious to see what happens with, Meg's kids.
Well, here's my question for you then. Would you recommend these books to other people? Kids, adults?
Kids.
And not just 3, but kids? Would you recommend it to adults who haven't read it?
Honestly, not so much. It depends.
Yeah.
But I'd say anywhere from 5th grade to 8th grade, I would absolutely recommend. At least the first
all the way to
books.
high school. I'd say all the way to high school.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a problem with that. But I mean, I think that's the sort of target demographic I think would be able to catch all the nuances, because I sure didn't in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez. I'm sure I didn't today.
Yeah.
So.
Well, clearly we needed that family tree. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I think I'm similar to you, Bill. Like, I wouldn't go out and recommend that like an adult who had never read this would read it, because I don't think it would be super enjoyable for adults. But I do think, as like a middle grade story, I mean, I'm sure it's not like, I don't necessarily feel like it would be top of my list, but it would be like if you had kids in that age group that liked this kind of stuff, they'd probably like it. And I think, there is some good stuff in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Like I said, I'd probably, up into high school, maybe not all the way to senior in high school, but parents, maybe, adults, maybe if they're the parents of somebody who's going to be reading the book, or, read it with their kid.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, that was my interest in rereading it, was like, would my kids like this? And at what age might my kids like this? Like, they're too young for them now, but, it was good to kind of look at it from that perspective.
Anybody have anything else they wanted to bring up? Any other notes that they didn't get to?
No, just like I said, I did enjoy dipping my toes back into this sort of familiar but kind of forgotten pond, and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Which was more familiar as you reread it, this or Earthsea?
This, honestly. I don't think when I read Earthsea, I was able to appreciate the prose nearly as much. Rereading Earthsea, like we did last year, I just fell in love with the prose of Ursula K. Le Guin. It's beautiful. It's amazing. I mean, she's one of those authors who wields it like a scalpel instead of a chainsaw. And you don't see that a lot, but that's what it feels like. So I fell in love with her prose. So
of all the stuff we've covered on this channel so far, it's probably the best prose.
Yeah, I can agree.
There is somebody coming up later this year who I think might challenge her for best prose, but they're one of my favorites.
Are we doing Stephen King?
Not yet, but we will be doing Stephen King. Yes, I will read Stephen King. Glenn, who doesn't like Stephen King usually, I'm going to be reading the Dark Tower series, so that's going to be fun. Next time we come back, we are going to be discussing, I do believe Dune is next.
Yes.
Dune is next, but we've got a couple of classics coming up. We've got Dune, and we've got Mitch, who we had on the other channel for a while for The Expanse. He's going to be joining us to discuss that, as well as Angela from Do Unicorns Read on YouTube. And after that, we're going to be doing A Tale of Two Cities, which Bill's reading for the first time soon. That's going to be interesting. That's going to be the first time for me since 7th grade. So I've only ever read it once. But thanks for watching. Please come back, leave a like and subscribe. And hey, don't forget to be awesome.
See you.